Our first speaker this afternoon is no stranger to Nassau County. Laura Curran served as the county executive of Nassau County from 2018 to 2021, managing a $3.3 billion annual budget and the deployment of 7,500 employees who provided critical services to more than 1.3 million residents. Under her leadership and backing for the police, corrections, deputy sheriffs, fire marshals, and emergency management, Nassau County earned a U.S. News & World Report ranking as the safest community in America for 2 consecutive years. Ms. Curran's years in public office are marked by the turnaround of a chronic deficit into surplus, implementing policies to make government more transparent and accountable, and prioritizing smart infrastructure. As a member of the Nassau County Legislature, Ms. Curran worked with her colleagues in the legislature to improve public safety, public works, and veterans affairs. Please help me welcome Laura Curran.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the lovely welcome and the lovely introduction. So I want to stay humble, but I just have to correct one thing. We actually were ranked the safest community for 3 years in a row. Just saying. No. So I'm really excited to be here. This is actually the first time I'm speaking to a crowd this large, not as a candidate, not as an elected official. So it's a beautiful thing. I can say whatever I want. I want to start off by thanking Sheriff Toulon for inviting me to be a part of this. Sheriff and I worked really well together across the county lines for the common public safety of Long Island. And I'm really impressed with the work that he's doing. I had him on my podcast recently, and we were talking about his SMART Center, which is a reentry plan for inmates. And he's got, and this is just an amazing statistic that I think really needs to be amplified, an 11% recidivism rate compared to a recidivism rate of 60 to 70% statewide through this program. That's a very big deal. He is a man who holds himself accountable. So along with the professional chops, he's also got a demeanor that is very calm, and I'm sure many of you can say, second this emotion, calm and down to earth. And that really signals that he's a guy that you can trust and respect. So it's talk about the three-headed monster. For me, the three-headed bonus of being a really good leader is having that trust, that respect, and that accountability, and to be able to build on that. And that's really what I want to talk about in my remarks today. So I'm just going to tell you a very little bit about myself and then about my tenure as county executive. So I had quite an itinerant childhood. I was in 8 different schools in 3 different countries by the time I finished 8th grade. It wasn't ideal to be a child and to be plucked here and there, but it did make it very easy for me later in life to just be able to talk to anyone, to be comfortable in any kind of group. It also made me very curious about people. I like finding out about people, like to detect what their accents are, whatever it may be. And that curiosity, I think, is what led me to my first career as a newspaper reporter for the Daily News and the New York Post. And, a reporter is basically just a professional busybody, so that was great. I made the transition from reporter to politician kind of by accident. A friend of mine in the school playground said, you covered education for the Daily News for a while, you should run for school board. So I did. Didn't think I would win. I ended up winning, ran for legislator, did that for 4 years, county legislator on the South Shore here in Nassau, and then threw my hat in the ring for county exec in 2017. And I just, being the county executive, obviously trial by fire started on day 2. Actually, it was trial by storm. Any of you who've been up to Albany for the State of the State address know you go up in the beginning of the year. It was Governor Cuomo at the time, this big fancy speech about everything that's going to happen. And then someone came up to me and said, there's going to be a nor'easter that's going to drop a ton of snow in Nassau. You've got to get back. So we raced the storm back to Nassau County. Day 3, it's the classic thing. You got the windbreaker, you got the pile of salt, the snow is blowing, the trucks are out, this and that. And I think, I don't want to sound like I'm boasting, but we handled it. Obviously, it was the DPW guys, the Department of Public Works guys who were out there doing the actual work. But I was the public face of it. I was the one communicating what we were doing, making sure it ran well. And I think in a strange way, it was kind of good that we had something so big and challenging and public right at the very beginning, because I never made a big deal about gender, and I'm the first woman and all of that county executive, but I think it proved like to the public, okay, this girl's got it, she can handle it, we're gonna be fine. Nothing really tested us, I think, in government, especially county government, than the year 2020. We had one thing after another. Obviously, the first was COVID. For those of you who work in county government, you know that the county is on the front lines of something like, say, a health crisis. We've got the health departments. We're in charge of public safety. We're in charge of making sure that the vulnerable get the services that they need. So we had to jump right into action. We all know, I mean, we can remember back to those dark days. There was no rule book. None of us had been through something like this before. So we had to make sure that the first responders had what they needed. We had to make sure that the health department and that, not enough people working there had what they needed to get it done. Had to make sure social services had also what they needed to get it done for the most vulnerable. I put together, right at the very beginning, a hospital calls CEOs and hospital leaders of all the 11 hospitals in Nassau County getting on the phone every week or so to talk about, do we have enough ventilators? Do we have PPE? Can we share best practices on retrofitting the hospitals, making those negative pressure rooms out of conference rooms, whatever it was, that I think was very helpful and hadn't been happening before. We also, something that we also instituted right at the beginning was daily conference calls. I remember getting on the phone at 4:45 every day and talking about, what are we gonna do with this? We had to get refrigerated trucks for the bodies because the hospitals couldn't handle them, the morgues couldn't handle them. And I remember we had to get our DPW guys, again, retrofitting them so we could fit more in. And there was one particular moment where it really sunk in, because you're just going, really sinking in about what is actually happening. And it was a conversation about body bags. And I remember it was the police commissioner said, well, we gotta make sure we got the body bags because the protocol is we have to double bag, and all right, do we have enough, And I kind of sat back for a minute and I thought, wow, we're having a conversation about body bags. This was not to be expected. Another important part I found was communication, communicating to the public about what was happening. My goal in these was to make sure that the information I was giving, again, early days, was understandable and it was useful. My goal is to always keep it short, keep it concise, keep it calm, give people the information that they need, not a lecture, not a scolding, just the information. And there's two guys who I drew on for inspiration that might surprise you. Because I was thinking, okay, people need to know what's happening, but they also need some reassurance. They need to know we're gonna make it through this, we're gonna be fine, we got you, we got this under control as much as anyone could. The first was Rudy Giuliani. And I remember, right after 9/11, I think it was just hours after the attack. And whatever you may think of him now, this was such a shining moment in my mind. A reporter asked, what are the casualties gonna be? And he said, I don't know, but the casualties will be more than we can bear. And that statement still hits, because he resonated with where people were, with what they needed to hear, that there was feeling, there was emotion, and it was very real. I don't know if any of you remember that moment, but it really stuck in my mind. And the other inspiration was a very different kind of person, and that's Winston Churchill. And it might not have been on the level of we shall fight on the beaches, but he had a way of bringing people together in a very dark time, keeping them strong, keeping their courage up, that I felt we really needed in those early, very uncertain days. Because remember when we didn't know if the hospitals could handle it? We didn't remember if we'd have enough PPE, or we're gonna run out. We came like this close to running out of ventilators. So keeping the courage. And while giving the information, I would always try to drop in something like, in human history, there's always been crises, but life always finds its balance again. And I had a moment, this is after I'm out of office, it's in January at the Islanders game, actually, at the new UBS Arena, walking in the concourse. This guy comes up to me and he said, I have so many conversations that start like this, I'm a Republican, but, he said, I'm a Republican, but I just had to thank you. You kept my family calm. You kept us sane during the pandemic. And to me, job done. That meant more than anything else. There's some funny things that can happen because we did about 100, I think it was 116 press conferences every day throughout the beginning of it all. And I would have, police commissioner, health commissioner, everyone else come and give whatever the information was. But very early on, I remember it was a rainy day, and I said something that reminded me that words are important, and sometimes it's good just to take a minute and don't react. Respond instead of react. But a reporter from Fox said, "Oh, there's lines at the gun stores. What do you say to people who are online buying guns?" And I hadn't heard that. So I just blurted out, "Well, that's stupid. Why would, the gun's not going to kill the virus. We got to just stay home and hunker down, and that's how we get rid of the virus." So that night on Fox News, that was turned into a segment like, "This crazy lady wants to take away your guns." That was not my intention at all. So it's good to keep in mind when you are communicating, just take that second. If I had taken a second, I probably would have said something like, "I understand that people are anxious, but here in Nassau County, public safety is number one. We're going to make sure that you're going to be as safe as you can be." And then move on to whatever the news of the day was. But it's good to remember to take that moment, and also good to remember that sometimes your words will be misinterpreted. Sometimes it just won't go over well. That's okay. You just do your best and carry on. There's always the next day. Speaking of controversies, after the first part of COVID passed, that's when I think of let the culture wars begin. Unmasking, opening the businesses, that was very hot. And I was personally very concerned about the state of our businesses. I've got kids myself, about what was happening to their education, happening to their mental health. And I was also not 100% in sync with the state government, with the Cuomo administration at the time. My philosophy was that people should be able to make decisions for themselves, that we give them the information, we can trust them to make the right decision for themselves. So I very politely and perhaps kind of quietly pushed back, put together an economic development council made up of business leaders from all different sectors, whether it was retail or labor, nonprofits, hospitality, you name it, all the different sectors. And we really pushed. We got the malls reopened, we got things going. We were able to open our restaurants before New York City, so we had a whole campaign enticing New York City diners to come and spend money in Nassau. That was actually pretty successful. And during this time, it was such a contentious time, and I just remember people were angry at me on both sides. Let's open up everything, were mad because they thought the state policies were mine, which they weren't. And then the people who were very cautious and wanted to keep everything shut down were angry because they thought, oh, you're going to kill people, it's going to be terrible. And I thought, well, you know what? If I have both sides angry with me, I'm probably doing something right. So my ethos was, when I spoke in public, no shame, no blame, give people the information, and then trust them. People aren't stupid. They can make the right decisions for themselves and for their businesses. So that's COVID in a nutshell. Next big part of 2020 was, of course, the aftermath of the George Floyd killing. So we in Nassau, and I'm assuming it's similar in Suffolk County, we had about 300 demonstrations, including one in front of my house in July. We had two missions when it came to the demonstrations: keeping people safe, number two, protecting people's First Amendment right to protest. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we really took both of those seriously. And we saw the results. Like we saw on our screens in so many other parts of the country, we did not have looting, we did not have mass arrests, no fires. It's all about de-escalation. It's all about conversation. And I remember the police, very well trained in de-escalation, law enforcement, keeping everything calm. It wasn't easy. It was not easy. And again, like with the storm, but much more, it was our men and women who were out there doing the work, the planning, the de-escalation, the conversations, our bringing the temperature down. The police commissioner was out there, Patrick Ryder was out there talking to people, walking miles. having those conversations, getting those phone numbers. And I think that is what made such a very big difference in keeping it calm. Not easy. It's so important to talk to people in a human way, in whatever kind of circumstance you're in. Because we're all human. There is some connection between all of us. The trick is to find it. And I always think, we never know what might not have happened had it not been so disciplined with the training and the de-escalation. But I know in my heart that we saved lives, not to mention property. Okay, so that was that. It's a lot there. And there's a lot more that we could talk about, but time is limited. So going on in our tour of 2020, then there was Tropical Storm Isaias, power outages, downed trees, fed up telecommuters who were stuck at home with the kids, trying to be on Zoom, working from home, power's out, no internet, everyone's angry. And I was speaking with the DA about this earlier. Normal people don't really know who's in charge of what, so we would get a lot of blame for the power. So we spent a lot of time helping people navigate that, putting them in touch with PSE&G, getting the lines back up, getting everyone back in. And then after that, there were the sharks. Remember those? So of course we took that seriously. We had the Marine Bureau, we had the Aviation Bureau, we had the patrols out, we had a whole warning system. But honestly, it also gave us a chance for a little levity. A little bit of a laugh, kind of like the tennis balls did. So during unprecedented times, that trust, that accountability, and that respect, building it with communities, remained so important and literally saved lives. I know that in my heart. And as was mentioned in the introduction, with a 7,500 person workforce, $3.3 billion budget, 1.3 million residents, in a charged political environment, leading a government that had chronic, decades-long problems, it was really important that I could trust my team. I think we've all had situations where the atmosphere is a little off, doesn't feel quite right, trust isn't there. But I had a health commissioner who was actually, of all the health commissioners in New York State, the only one who was an infectious disease specialist. That's Dr. Larry Eisenstein, so I could trust him to run with it. Put him out there in the press, knew he would say the right thing, it would all be good. Had a sheriff who was sworn in March of 2020. Had to get the jail ready. Not easy. Confined population, sheriffs, corrections officers, all inside. He did a great job. Economic development, working with the businesses, keeping them going. Social services, keeping them going. Press team, getting out the information. I knew I could trust them. All crises of that year had to do with public safety. Police, medics, sheriffs, 911 operators. I can't stress enough how important it was that the police commissioner and I had a shared sense of what our role was, what our mission was. To protect public safety and to protect the public's right. The commissioner and I could talk honestly. We were a team, and we had each other's backs, in the press and with the public. But what if there was a tit-for-tat competition or jealousy over who got more press or who got credit for this or that? I believe it would have undermined so much of our work. And at a time when lives and livelihoods were literally on the line. And I guess that's just my pitch. All of you, most of you, are in law enforcement. You all work in teams. And having that trust, building those relationships, we all have insecurities, but putting them to the side for a minute is so incredibly important. And I think especially in these times when things are so divided. Not everything goes perfectly, even when you've got a great team. Sometimes yourself will make a mistake. It's a given. And as Jason was saying in the earlier talk, if you were here for that, it's not that it's not going to happen. Of course it's going to happen. It's how you handle it. And one example that still makes me cringe, but I'm going to share it with you anyway, I call it the robocall from hell. This is very early on in my tenure. And someone in communications sent out a robocall to every senior in Nassau County. It was supposed to go to just I don't know, a couple thousand. Had to do with assessment, and they had to get some form in. So you can imagine the panic. We had, coming down to 240 Old Country Road, all these people with canes and walkers, and it was crappy out like today. And a reporter came to my office from Channel 12 to come and talk about it, and he looked at me, he's like, yeah, it's really bad. So I said, I gotta go down there. So I went down, got my coat, ran down there, talked to the folks online. We had team members dealing with them, sending them home. Parking was a nightmare, as you can imagine. So going there, being present, I thought was very important that I had to go myself, because again, may have been someone else's mistake, but it's on me. I'm the public face. And we actually solved a few problems from some of these people who had other issues that they had to deal with, so it wasn't all bad. But that showed to me when there's a problem, you gotta own it, you gotta deal with it, you have to take steps in how you're gonna fix it, and then tell the public what you've done. And every time we had a robocall, it was belts and suspenders. So we never had that problem again, thank God. And sometimes leadership is about what doesn't happen, the bad stuff that doesn't happen. Does anyone here remember the shooting at the Stop and Shop in West Hempstead? It was in April of 2021. And it still fades from my memory because it could have been so much worse. There was a disgruntled employee, I believe it was, who killed a manager and wounded 2 other people who worked there. He got away with the gun. I was monitoring the situation from my office. There was rumors that he got on a bus to go to Queens. He still had the gun. I mean, we just didn't know what was going to happen. But because we had built great relationships through the police department and other ways with the community, we got a tip from an apartment in Hempstead, in the village, who said the guy is there. So our guys and gals, very professional, very good training, were able to get him, get the gun. Nobody else was hurt. And again, I shudder to think, what if we hadn't had those relationships with the community? What if we hadn't had people who trusted us enough to call us to come and do it safely? What could have happened? So sometimes it's good to, I guess you can't be remembered for what didn't happen, but sometimes what didn't happen is more important than what does happen when you're a leader. You know, one thing I want to talk about, and I'm really happy and eager to take questions if you have them, so I don't want to talk for too long. No matter how good our teams are, and no matter what good people we might be or how good our intentions might be, even if we're flawed individuals, there is such a politicization of law enforcement right now in our culture. And it really feels to me that trust is breaking down on all sides. And sometimes it feels like you can't even have a conversation, or you have to be careful before you wade into that conversation. But I talk to people of all political stripes. People come up to me all the time, grocery store, in the gym, Islanders games, whatever. And what I find is sensible people want sensible laws, and they want accountability for both the public and for law enforcement. Doesn't sound crazy. It doesn't sound partisan. Doesn't sound radical. That's what most people want. I also found that people in a crisis, they want calm and they want reassurance. Because if you're a hothead and you're flying off the handle here and there, it doesn't feel very trustworthy. I know what people don't want. They don't want platitudes. They don't want rhetoric. They want to know what your plan is. What's the plan? What are you going to do? And people are worried. They feel unsafe, and they feel angry, and they don't like the angry and the defensive rhetoric that they're hearing from so many leaders right now. Okay, I don't want to leave you feeling hopeless. So what can we do? What can we, mere mortals in our jobs, do? We can't control the world. We can't control the media. We can't control other people's minds. But we do have some control over our immediate environment. We can set the tone for the workplace. If things get weird, we can pick up the phone. We really do set the tone with our words and with our actions. I mean, this might be a little silly example, but nothing annoys me more than when I see someone flinging a McDonald's bag or something out of the car. It really pisses me off. So what can I do? You know, I can't go run them down and yell at them. So sometimes when I'm walking my dog, I'll bring an extra bag and just pick up the litter around the neighborhood. Just makes me feel better. It's a little tiny thing I can do to control my environment. We can also remind ourselves that our job is to build trust and respect and accountability, and that small actions can have a real ripple effect. If you feel helpless, you can make the world a better place by doing small things. We can also remember to put our insecurities and to put our egos to the side. Hey, if a politician can do it, there's hope for everyone. Thank you.
So we have time for some questions.
Yeah.
If anyone has a question for Laura Curran.
Please don't be shy. I love questions. Yeah.
Hi, Ms. Curran. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I just have a question. What particular skill set of yours did you use frequently in managing multiple agencies in your administration?
The most important thing was having a team that I could trust and putting people in place who were there to do the actual job. One thing I did is I was very careful not to hire political people because I felt that then maybe they would take their eye off the ball. And I think that's what made my team so effective and really able to get the county and to get the county's residents through some very difficult times. I mean, the other skill that was helpful to me personally in communication was the fact that I had been a reporter. So I'd been to countless press conferences. I'd sort of seen what works and what doesn't work in communication. And I think it made me much more comfortable talking to the press. You know, whether it was a small college newspaper or national news, cable news, whatever it was, I was very comfortable speaking to the press, and I saw the benefit of talking to the press as a way to get the message out about what everyone in county government was doing for them. Yeah.
Other questions? Oh, okay, hang on. I'm gonna sneak past you, sir. I'm like Phil Donahue.
So I was curious, in your last election, it was a bit of a surprise. It was a wacky election time, and the polls had you ahead.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was a surprise. But what did you muster as a leader to help the new administration for a transition so balls wouldn't be dropped?
Yeah, that's a great question because we're all here for a temporary time, whatever our job is. Mine was a little more temporary than perhaps I had planned. But the mission was important, and so I made my people available to his people during the transition so that they could get the information they needed, so that they could continue down the road. Because you know how it is when you're in a job, you start a lot of things, not everything's done. You want to make sure that it continues. And the important thing is to remember it's not about me. If the voters wanted to go in a different direction, I completely respect that. It's not about me, it's about the people. That's it.
Any other questions? I have a question over here. Hang on. Go this way. Sheriff? There you go, Sheriff.
The boss has a question.
Well, it's really not a question. It's really a statement. During COVID, you were out there every single day, holding press conferences, informing. As a Suffolk County resident, I thank you because I didn't get much information from Suffolk. So I watched Nassau County and I watched you. And I think I often told you my parents in the Bronx watched you because Mayor de Blasio wasn't doing much for the city either. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Suffolk appreciated what you did. And hopefully if we ever have another firestorm like that, we'll have a leader that can get out and inform us.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam County Exec. So, me being in a great position as a commissioner, outside of public safety, what are the three most important things you want your commissioner to be able to be perceived as what we're doing right regarding public safety as a law enforcement agency?
So besides the public safety portion of it, I think number one would be the connective tissue with communities, to be able to talk to people when they're angry, when they're happy, when they're scared, and to make that human connection. Whether it's you or your staff or the officers or whoever it is, I think that's really important, just to be present. That would be number one. Number two, you know, what I talk about, the whole ego thing, I think ego isn't really ego, it's really just insecurities. And as I said, we all have them. But I have seen, and I'm not commenting on the dynamic in Suffolk or anywhere else in particular, but we have seen the leader and the police commissioner get into that ego battle. I'm thinking back in the Bratton and Giuliani days, so I will say that specifically. Do you remember the mayor was jealous of the commissioner because he was on the cover of the magazine, and it just didn't go well. There was a rivalry there, and that doesn't serve the people. So whatever you can do to have a good relationship with the principal is always helpful. And without blaming one or the other, it's something that, you know, one person is responsible just as much as the other one for the relationship. So that would be number two. And number three, I think, would be just, you know, keeping in mind every single human being that lives in your area, that lives in your district, and that you serve them. Those are the people that you really do serve. Those human beings that are relying on you and relying on your officers and your staff to keep them safe. Which brings me back to number one, why that relationship is so important. They may never meet you in person, but just, you know, to emit that feeling of caring and of trust, respect, and accountability would be very helpful. It's always very good.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks. And I don't presume to give you advice, because clearly you're the police commissioner, you know what you're doing, and you're doing a very good job. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Just more so on the advice factor. You mentioned that your time, you not wish, but was shorter than what you have proposed it to be. With that said, is there something that you wish you was able to do that you did not get around to doing, and, you know, you wish you could have?
Yeah, I feel like we were so close on the hub, and that's out of my hands now. You know, finally getting right across the street, getting that land developed. So hopefully it'll happen, but that's the one thing that really sticks in my craw that I can't do.
This conference is about leadership, and we have it's a law enforcement, and law enforcement is typically men, but there are a lot of women coming into law enforcement who are going into leadership positions. So what advice do you have for them as females in leadership positions?
Yeah, that's a great question. And law enforcement is very different, because it has been historically very male. So you could probably teach, the women here could probably teach me a few things about that. But one thing that I found, I never wanted to make a big deal about gender when I was running, even though I was going to be the first woman, which, you know, is pretty cool, I'll take it. But I never wanted to make it a big deal, like, go vote for me because I'm a woman. I wanted it to be on the merits. And while it was cool, and I hope to be inspiring to other young women out there, I never wanted that to be the overriding topic. And I think that's important. You know, oh, maybe someone said something because I'm a woman that they wouldn't say to a man. And, you know, you can really start getting into a downward spiral on that, but it doesn't help. It doesn't make you more confident. It doesn't help you build relationships. Sometimes you just gotta, you know, yep, I'm a woman, here it is, I'm the first one, I'm a trailblazer, but I have a job to do, and I have people that I have to serve. I'm in public service. Again, it's not about me and what you think about me, and that man said something mean to me or whatever. It's about the service. But as I say, I think the women in law enforcement could probably teach me more about that than I can say to them.
I just want to make a comment because it's at the front of my brain. I want to thank you, Ms. Curran, for being bold and courageous to speak about issues within your party. And that's where I'm going to leave it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you. I've gotten a little trouble here and there, but that's okay.
Hello, Ms. Curran. I had to pay you one more compliment that's coming from the residents in Baldwin, where I used to live. They constantly appreciate the fact that they still see you out there at the cardboard boat races.
Yeah, the cardboard boat race. We won.
Okay, yeah, good. Your boat had the nice design. And a lot of people appreciate politicians to see them as regular people who are engaged in the community. So I have to extend a thank you for my friends who still live in Baldwin, and they appreciate the things that you did in the past and hopefully in the future.
Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you very much. By the way, if you want to hear more, I've kind of gone back to my roots in journalism, so I started a podcast called Cut to the Chase with Laura Curran. Everyone from Kellyanne Conway to Melissa DeRosa to authors and you name it. It's a lot of fun. It's a half hour. And it's kind of fun now, having been a reporter and been inside government, to then go out of government again with the knowledge that I have, and then, you know, as I said at the beginning of my remarks, being able to be very open and honest about it, it's very refreshing. So it's a little pitch right there.
Any final questions? Well, we thank you very much. That was very enlightening.
Thanks for your attention. Thank you. Thank you.